At the time of filming, the T3 Bankstown line had about 16 days left as a heavy rail line, as will be closed on Monday, September 30th, ready to be upgraded as a metro line from Sydenham to Bankstown. The metro began operation in 2019 from Tallawong to Chatswood and was then extended from Chatswood to Sydenham in August 2024. In preparation for its closure, Transport Heritage New South Wales had conducted 3 shuttle trips from Sydney to Bankstown between Saturday the 14th and Sunday the 15th of September 2024, with 2 types of trains, which were Red Electric Set F1, better known as the Red Rattler from Historic Electric Traction, and 3265 from the Powerhouse Museum. We had attended the Saturday event. Originally, there was to be 2 shuttle trips, but a third one had been added for both trains 2 days before the run due to popular demand. The Bankstown line was established between Sydenham and Belmore in 1895 and was the second suburban line to open in Sydney. The first was the North Shore Railway line in 1890. All other railway lines were main lines delivering traffic into Sydney. Improvements were made over the years for the Bankstown line, such as the extension to Bankstown in 1909, with intermediate stations such as Punchbowl and Lakemba added in. In 1916, the Metropolitan Goods Line was opened, running alongside the Bankstown line between Marrickville and Campsie. 10 years later, 1926, the line was the second in Sydney to be electrified, with a maintenance depot being established at Punchbowl until it was closed down in 1995. A second extension to Barong from Bankstown was made in 1928, providing connections to the main suburban railway at Lidcombe and the main south to Liverpool. Ten years later, 1938, Wiley Park Station was added in on the line between Lakemba and Punchbowl, and 1 year later, electrification was extended to Regent's Park from Bankstown. The Red Rattler, which had departed from Sydney via Sydenham, is now leaving Bankstown Station, passing us at Marion Street Car Park. It'll be heading to Villawood, where it will stop, and then head back to Sydney. While we await for the Red Rattler, 3265 is now seen passing through Bankstown via Regent's Park in Western Sydney. The loco will stop here, and will make its way back to Sydney with its passengers. It'll make a stop at Sydenham and Sydney's Inner West for passengers who wish to take the metro to Sydney. As we await for the Red Rattler, we captured more of the modern-day electrics of the Sydney Trains fleet going about their daily commute. This one passing us is part of the Waratah B set, which came into service in 2018. While this one is part of the Waratah A set, which made its debut service in 2011. Waratah comes from the Eora Aboriginal word Warada, meaning beautiful or seen from afar. The flower that carries the word is the official floral state emblem of New South Wales. Then we see the Red Rattler passing through, now heading for Sydney. It too will stop at Sydenham for the same reason as 3265. We now move to Belmore, as we see the Red Rattler passing through from the bowling club and sports ground, heading for Sydney. As we wait for 3265, we take a look at Belmore Sports Ground, formerly Belmore Oval, home to the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs in the National Rugby League, NRL. The ground was used by the Bulldogs from 1936 to 1998, with their moving to Stadium Australia, now Accor Stadium. The Bulldogs returned to Belmore in 2015 for the 80th anniversary of the club's establishment, and will play home games here on occasions. At the time of filming, the Bulldogs had just finished 6th on the NRL ladder for the 2024 season, and will be up against the Manly Sea Eagles at Accor Stadium on Sunday, September 15th for the NRL semi-finals. Unfortunately for their fans, the Bulldogs lost the game to Manly 24-22, and with the game being an elimination round, their season came to an end. Before we conclude the day with 3265 passing through, we see two A-sets passing by, offering us a final glimpse of heavy rail services, as Belmore will be amongst the other stations on the Bankstown route that'll be converted. Although Transport Heritage New South Wales had conducted a final train on the line in the early morning of Saturday, September 21st, using Silver Electric Set S28 from Historic Electric Traction, this is where we say farewell to heavy rail on the Bankstown line, as 3265 makes its way back to Sydney. While spending some time out of service earlier in the year for some maintenance, and then returning to service in July taking trips around the Hunter Valley until August, R766 is now providing trips for the picnic train around the New South Wales Southern Highlands, with its first trip to Moss Vale from Enfield in Sydney's inner west on Saturday, September 21st, 2024. The train is seen passing over Menangle Bridge. Diesel locomotive 4903 took the train from Sydney, due to R766 not being approved yet to run on Sydney Transit's tracks. As of filming, it is still qualified to run only on ARTC tracks. It had also been a while for us seeing R766, as we last saw at the Hunter Valley Steamfest in Maitland in April 2023. The loco is now seen passing through Middleton through strong wind. As an empty freight passes by, R766 now pulls into Moss Vale. Earlier, it had stopped at Barrel to drop off booked passengers, and around this time of year, Barrel will host their annual Tulip Time Festival. Once passengers had been disembarked, R766 now shuts itself to the middle line to make way for oncoming trains and to be serviced ready for its return journey to Enfield. While we wait to see R766 backing down, we see an old yard crane still standing. While Moss Vale is known for their heritage buildings, modernity still prevails as the station is being upgraded, such as these frames for long-needed lifts while still maintaining the original infrastructure. It is hoped that this upgrade will be finished by late 2025. Later in the day, we arrive at Burradoo, and before we see the R-Class on its return journey, we see two 82 class diesels from Pacific National hauling a container train. Later the R now passes through, and will then stop at Barrel to pick up its booked passengers. To conclude the day, R766 now passes Menangle Park Station, heading onwards to Enfield to meet up with 4903, who will take the passengers on to Sydney. The hollering in the background comes from the horse track next to the station. Another R-Class, but this time a broad gauge one in the capital of Victoria, Melbourne. At Southern Cross Station on Sunday, October 13th, 2024, R711 is seen coming in from Newport, a suburb of Melbourne where SteamRail is based at the former Newport Railway Workshops, to collect more of its passengers for a day trip to Bairnsdale in East Gippsland. R711 was the 11th member of the 70 R-Class locos that were built in 1951 at the North British Locomotive Works in Glasgow, Scotland, and spent its short working life pulling passengers, goods, and occasionally special trains until 1965. It was placed in storage at Newport until in 1981 it was plinth outside a Bendigo station in Victoria's North Central between Victorian Rail and Steamage Australia, which was done as a deal to swap 711 with now New South Wales based R766 to run tours for the latter company. It would later be removed from its plinth in 1995. West Coast Railways was interested in having the loco restored to run trains from Melbourne to Warrnambool on its West Coaster service that runs on Saturdays with R766. R711 was converted to be oil-fired, was fitted with a twin Lempore exhaust system, a power reverser and diesel multiple unit control stand, and returned to service in 1998. It would run those trains until 2002 when the engine was up for maintenance. West Coast Railway was folded in 2004 after the passing of its director Gary MacDonald in April 2003. The same year when it was folded, R711 along with R766 were transferred to SteamRail at Newport. Once approval was made by the Bendigo Council for SteamRail to return R711 to service, it was repainted blue and yellow as seen in the footage, and most of its modification from WCR were removed, apart from its oil conversion. It steamed in 2007, but returned to service in 2011, and was named Spirit of Bendigo, as seen on the cab side. On this trip, R711 will take the train to Bairnsdale to meet up with R761, who took a service train the previous day to the final stop of the tour. It will be the first time ever that the two R-Class engines will reach that far east of Victoria, as on previous tours, R-Class engines could only reach as far as Sale due to the railway bridge over the Avon River at Stratford, now replaced. It was also the first steam haul tour to Bairnsdale since 2005, and the first heritage tour train to the city in 2010. R761 will take the return trip to Melbourne, while R711 will bring the service train back to Melbourne later on in the evening. For the return journey, we moved to Flinders Street Station just up the road from Southern Cross. It is the busiest station in Victoria and was opened in 1854 by the Melbourne and Hobson's Bay Railway Company. The dome seen here from platform 10 is part of the iconic Edwardian-style entrance which was built in 1909. Because of its grand and somewhat exotic look, it led to the myth that the design was intended for Mumbai's Victoria terminus in India and vice versa, but was swapped in the post. But despite that, the station itself is the oldest in Australia and has been part of the Victorian Heritage Register since 1982. While we wait for R761, we see Metro Set 747M of the Siemens Nexus class pulling in, picking up some late night commuters for Werribee and Melbourne's southwest. These were built between 2002 to 2005 by Siemens Transportation Systems in Vienna, Austria, and were delivered to Melbourne between 2003 to 2006. The music in the background is from the restaurant Arbory, adding some vibe into Melbourne's lively nightlife. 747M will now leave for more commuters. R761, coal-fired, will now pull in to drop off its booked passengers. The last time we seen this loco was back in 2018 at Southern Cross Station when it pulled a private charter to Castlemaine in Victoria Central West, which can be found in our December 2018 edition. October marked 40 years since R761 returned to service by SteamRail in 1984, and it was the first of the 3 R-Class engines to return to service. During that year, it ran a test run to Ballarat and a SteamRail member train to Woodend, and following a repaint in early 1985 it officially returned to service that year. To mark the occasion, SteamRail fully repainted R761 in shiny black and red, returning it to the 1985 condition. This includes the engine's unique headboard placement below the smoke box door as shown earlier, which was synonymous with the period. It was first shown at the biannual Newport Open Day event, which was held during Victoria's Moomba Long Weekend in March 2024. Its next open day will be in 2026. R761 will now depart the Southern Cross before making its way back home to Newport. Although these 2 locomotives are Victorian based, and Railroad New South Wales is based in New South Wales, the 2 R-Class engines have some association with New South Wales, with R711 working alongside R766, and R761 making various trips to Albury over the years, the border town in New South Wales, including the last broad gauge steam train to the station in June 2008, as the line was later converted to standard gauge. And both broad gauge locos ran alongside New South Wales' 3801 with their last get-together in Easter 2000, alongside Powerhouse Museum's 3830 on the Millennium Aurora. Meanwhile, another commuter train is seen running parallel with the R-Class as it passes the Yarra River. We're back in New South Wales to see R766 on another picnic train special, this time to Goulburn in the southern tablelands of New South Wales on Saturday, October 19th, 2024, as we see it along with the picnic trains 4903 passing through Douglas Park. Once again, 4903 brought the train from Sydney to Enfield to meet up with R766. The reason this train is called the Goulburn Steampunk Picnic Train was due to the Steampunk Victoriana Fair being held at the Goulburn Historic Waterworks. We'll be chasing the train as far as Exeter. Next up, as clouds gathered, is Moss Vale at the Triangular Loop. As we wait for R766, we see other trains passing through. Here is an Endeavour set from New South Wales Trainlink. Next up, an empty coal train hauled by the Pacific National's TT class number 102 and 107 top and tailing. Meanwhile, R766 is seen pulling into Moss Vale, ready to be serviced. Before we move closer to the loco, we see another empty coal train in another top and tail formation, hauled by two UGL Rail C44 ACI locomotives that are part of Horizon 6000 class, which were number 6003 at the front and 6010 at the rear. The triangular loop where these two locos were coming from leads to Robertson and would descend down the Illawarra escarpment heading towards Unanderra and Wollongong. While final checks are being made for the engine before its journey to Goulburn, we see two diesels passing through, with one from Horizon and another from Southern Short Haul Railroad. After being serviced, R766 now heads forth to Goulburn. Next, we see the loco passing through Exeter. Later in the day, As the sun tries to poke through the cloudy weather, we arrive at the Australian Botanical Garden Mount Annan, located in the suburb of Mount Annan in Sydney's southwest near Campbelltown and Camden. It's the largest botanical garden in Australia, crossing 416 hectares, 1,030 acres, that specialises in native plants with a collection of 4,000 species. The gardens are also home to wild kangaroos and wallabies. The land's traditional custodians, that the garden now sits on, belongs to the Darawal Indigenous people, and was later a dairy pasture, until it was acquired by the Royal Botanic Garden and Dominic Trust in 1984. 4 years later, it was opened to the public in October 1988 by the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, during Australia's bicentennial. In the distance, we see R766 coming from Menangle Park and passing the Triangle Loop Glenlee Junction, which once led to Glenlee Colliery and is now the site of Horizon's container terminal. In 1884, Glenlee had a railway station, but was closed down in 1947 and was later demolished with little trace of it remaining. (4903), who was seen at the back of the R-Class loco earlier, is now seen at the rear of the train. The R-Class loco will slow down here to await for a container train to pass just near Macarthur Station. Once the container train had passed through, R766 now heads off to Enfield. We are at Picton on a sunny Saturday, October 26, 2024. And before we see R766, another steam train tour was happening, with 3265 from the Powerhouse Museum heading its way to Bundadoon and Goulburn, with diesel locomotive 4501 with the Southern Highlander from Transport Heritage New South Wales. 4501 took the train from Sydney, and 3265 will be leading the train on from Picton. 4501 will then take the train back to Sydney on the return journey from Picton, while 3265 will be detached here for its base at Thirlmere. Meanwhile, an Explorer set from New South Wales Trainlink is seen passing through. Passengers on the steam train for Bundadoon will be seeing the Bundadoon Garden Ramble, as well as celebrating the restoration of the railway station. As 3265 departs, it is once again wearing the tribute headboard for Leon Kingus Rudd, as on this day, his ashes were being spread in the 32's firebox for a final farewell from friends and family, as 3265 was dubbed as his engine, with a blow of its whistle as a final salute to him. The other whistle in the background comes from the Picton Show at Victoria Park, home of the Picton Magpies. We now see R766 heading its way to Moss Vale from Enfield.
So has it been stopping at that station up there, has it? Is that the station up there? Just disorientated.
We managed to get some roadside footage of the R-Class outside of Bargo before we turn onto the Hume motorway. Our next stop is Barrel, where the locomotive will stop to drop off some of its passengers. Before we see it, we take a look around the heritage-listed station. The station opened on March 1st, 1867, and is still serving passengers today with morning services to Sydney and evening services to Goulburn. It is also serviced by the New South Wales Trainlink Explorer long-distance service from Sydney to the nation's capital Canberra and then on to Griffith, as a request stop for passengers who had booked to board or alight here. R766 will now pull in to let some of its passengers off, and will then make its way to Moss Vale. At Moss Vale, the passengers had disembarked, and R766 has now been serviced ready for the return run to Enfield. While it's being serviced, let's admire the work that the picnic train had done to bring the R-Class engine back to life. Later on, an empty freighter is seen passing through, hauled by two 81 class diesel locomotives from Pacific National. This carriage caught our particular attention. This is DF295, built by Commonwealth Engineering in 1972, and was then withdrawn from service in 1995 after being sold to International Services. In 1998, it was then sold to Michael Menzies, the former director of West Coast Railways that ran from Melbourne to Wollongong in Victoria, the same company that R766 had worked for in its preservation life when it was once a broad gauge engine. It is currently privately owned by Mr. Mark Stapleton in New South Wales and is leased out for heritage trains. The carriage is a dining car and was once used for the Indian Pacific. Later in the day, the R-Class had shunted to the other end of the train, ready to collect its passengers at both Moss Vale and Bowral, ready for the return run to Enfield, which from there on, 4903 will then take the train on to Lidcombe in Western Sydney. After a crew change in the yards outside the station, we see two TT class diesels from Pacific National hauling an empty freight top and tailing. Later on, R766 will now push its train to pull into Platform 1, ready for departure. We move to the bridge, and while we await for departure, we see the elevated timber fibre signal box still standing, which dates back to 1915. The station and yard itself was added on the New South Wales State Register in April 1999. With passengers on board, R766 now heads off for Bowral, and will then trek on to Enfield. R766 was supposed to take the same train on Sunday, October 27th, but overnight it had developed a small leak from its fusible plug, and there wasn't enough time to cool the locomotive down to safely replace it before its departure. It will pull its third train on December 1st, but today, this is where we say farewell to R766 for the 2024 New South Wales steam season. We now come to the second last mainline run of the New South Wales steam season for 2024, with the Powerhouse Museum's 3265 hauling a Transport Heritage New South Wales Steam to the Surf train. Usually this would go to Wollongong, but on Saturday, November 9th, 2024, it will venture to Kiama. The last time the loco made the trip that far south was during the October long weekend in 2019, when it once pulled the Kiama Picnic Train, which can be found in our November 2019 video. The 32 will stop outside of Hurstville Station to get clearance to go under the Supercentre, as it will traverse slowly before it proceeds to Sutherland. This is done to prevent excess steam getting into the Supercentre building. Heritage steam trains used to stop at Hurstville to pick up booked passengers whenever tours are made to the south coast, but as we mentioned earlier, it would have to pass through instead. .4501 is seen assisting the train. On the return journey, we see the locomotive passing through Mortdale over Ellen's subway. We now come to the last mainline train for the 2024 New South Wales steam season, with 3265 at Sydney Central Station, getting ready to pull the New South Wales Rail Museum Express to Thirlmere, with 4501 assisting at the rear once again. The humming sound coming from the 32 is from the generator seen on top near the whistle. This produces electricity for the loco's headlights and other electronics it has installed. It is also referred to as a dynamo. With passengers on board, 3265 now pulls out of the station heading for Thirlmere, with additional stops at Strathfield and Glenfield for more passengers. We now come to the finale of the New South Wales steam season for 2024 at the New South Wales Rail Museum at Thirlmere on Sunday, December 8th, 2024. Powerhouse Museum's locomotive 3265, all decorated in tinsel for the annual Santa steam train, is seen pulling into Thirlmere from Buxton with its first shuttle train for the day. And like in previous videos when we cover these runs, the 32 will now run round the train ready for its next run to Buxton. Of course, it isn't Christmas without the man in red, Santa Claus, as he climbs aboard greeting the passengers. Pity he didn't think of something cool to wear for the Australian summer. With everything all set, we will now follow the 32 onwards to Buxton as it leaves Thirlmere with its second load of passengers. Next, Couragard. And then Buxton. As a volunteer deals with uncoupling the engine from its carriages, 3265 will now make its way to the other end, ready for the return journey to Thirlmere. At Thirlmere, we see a painting of 3265 on the wall of the local newsagents. And here is the real one pulling in. With the second lot of passengers all off board and enjoying the Christmas activities at the museum, 3265 will now shunt itself to the water tower near the museum to be serviced.
You squeezed me. I think you're going to break me.
It's good. Going alright? Train going good?
Yeah. It's been fun for the kids. All about the kids.
Of course.
Love it.
Of course.
Yeah, the kids love it.
Thank you, Gemma. You guys progress?
Yeah, he wants the midnight express.
Hold on. Make it like that. You're gonna get all of Sydney here for December. I'm telling you. It'll be like Thomas.
At the museum, as we await to see 3265 departing with its second Mars train, we see some large inflatables of Santa and his reindeer being pushed around by the wind as clouds begin to form with some sunlight here and there.
We should hurry before the storm comes. If there's a storm.
We conclude the day with 3265 once again leaving Thirlmere for Buxton on its third run. And this is where we say farewell to the New South Wales steam season for 2024. Rail Around New South Wales would like to thank all the rail heritage organisations and its volunteers for a successful season, and will return to cover the steam season for the year 2025.